Okay, there we go. So, agriculture of India's tomorrow. So, if one is talking about tomorrow, the expectation is that you need to be probably a magician, look through a crystal ball and gaze into future. So, what does it hold for us? So that's one possibility, and some trial and error saying that, yeah, many things can happen, some will come true, some may not come true, and all that. And unfortunately, I can get hold of a crystal ball. So I said I'll take an alternative of listening to these key stakeholders today, what their aspirations are, what their concerns are, what their motivations are, and what drives each of these key stakeholders. And possibly in it will hold some ideas as to what might happen 7-10 years from now. So who are some of these key stakeholders for this sector? One is the consumer. In this case, I'm depicting a food consumer, but agriculture delivers output not just to food consumers, while that is a large part. It also delivers to fiber, fuel, and feed through agriculture, ingredients, and many things. So we will walk through, in some sense, a food consumer as an example, but if one has to get granular, then one has to look at a few other things also. But food consumer is one key stakeholder. Farmer, obviously, that's the center when you talk about agriculture. So what are some of the farmers' aspirations and concerns and motivations? And I'm using a few kids to actually depict society. What are society at large, which includes obviously the consumers and the farmers, but more importantly, those who don't have voice today. So what are some of the things that we are attempting to do from tomorrow's perspective as today's citizens of the society? So when we hear those three things, like Sagar Manthan, we need to churn, and you got Shiv and me to pull out a few things which are a lot of noise. When you listen, there's more noise. And how do you filter through a few things? And I hope to leave with you three insights as to what will tomorrow's agriculture be primarily, as three such possibilities. And that's essentially the effort of this session. So let's look at consumer first, as to what are some of the consumers. Okay, first, as the whole theme of this event was set up, 1.3 billion people, food for all. So it's not just more quantity, not only more number of people, but more people are becoming richer, which means consumption of food. Many years ago, when we had major setback in India in the form of agriculture reforms getting rolled back, that was 2007-8, when world food prices went through the roof, and the who is who started saying it's because India and China started eating more. So it's not just more mouths to feed, but richer, and therefore food for all assumes a much larger significance. So there are all kinds of estimates on how many numbers, but whether you say 20 million or 200 million, it won't really register in an event, so I'm not going to specific numbers, but just get thematically that one big issue is we need to produce a lot more food over this period. The second is that it's just a lot more food is not good enough, but it needs to be tasty. At the end of the day, when we had some breakfast or when you break out for lunch, you will move around to what is tasty here. So food consumer expects taste as a very important aspect of what food is being consumed. And so therefore, that's a very, very important. At one point of time, when we were a shortages economy, it didn't really matter of many of these other attributes. More food was good enough, and that was the time when it was shipped to mouth, so more ships came in, grain was available, and then it moved. From that situation now, I think as Indian agriculture at a broader level prospered and more food is getting produced, obviously many of these other aspects from a consumer perspective, as the affordability increased, they all come to the fore, and taste is one of them. And going beyond taste, once you are assured there's enough quantity and it's tasty, then you start getting worried about safety. I can see a fruit, I can see a vegetable, but is it really safe and hygienic the way it is produced? That's the topmost concern of consumers who can afford to buy food today, and say, no, what kind of chemicals have been used here? And what kind of residues still remain? You can't see many of those. Just wash with water, it won't go away. And therefore, that's a concern that one must factor in for consumers today. And then there's the whole aspect of nutrition. In fact, one of the biggest concerns for the world is what is called the hidden hunger. So we do have a fair amount of food reaching at subsidized prices in India to people who can't afford to buy food, offered at a much lower price. But is that basket good enough from the perspective of nutrition that is required? And obviously it has its own implications in terms of development of body, mind, and so on. So therefore, dealing with nutrition is another important aspect from a consumer's perspective. And yeah, we want all this, but we want all this at lower cost. The minute some prices move up a little bit, there is so much of furor. You're willing to pay any amount of money for many products and services, but the minute food prices go up, and we have seen in the past the governments have tumbled. You say farmer must get more income, but as a consumer, you are unwilling to pay those kind of prices. So therefore, all of this must happen, but at lower cost. So that really is, in some sense, what a consumer is looking for. Now let's turn and see as to what is it that the farmer is concerned about. Diametrically opposite, we just talked about consumers saying at a lower cost, the farmer says higher income is the very first objective. So I was walking around meeting some farmers yesterday, a few hours from here, and they were all happy with whatever work that is happening. Now we have access to water, markets, everything happened. And when we talked about, so are a lot more people now interested in agriculture? What are your children doing? What are your own aspirations for them? So no question of my son or daughter getting into agriculture. So I say, now you just said your incomes have moved up because of whatever interventions that we took along our value chains. They said, no, we still don't earn like you guys do. Your salaries go up literally every year. If you're a government employee, there is some DA that goes up, and if you're something else, all that goes up. For us, only the costs go up. When it comes to prices, you say inflation and prices won't go up. So this is not something which makes sense to us. And therefore, really the topmost concern from a farmer's perspective today is really higher income, which is one of the reasons, obviously, the Prime Minister has called for taking that as an outcome objective by saying that doubling farmer income by 2022. So in these 6 years, the efforts are just about commenced. So what we've achieved over the previous 15 years, given the importance of this, we are trying to do over the next, now only 4 years left in some sense. So that is the topmost. And then if you are in agriculture, and you have just seen flooding, just seen droughts simultaneously. So you just had Kerala floods and Tamil Nadu drought, and just neighboring states. So your standing crop, you're so happy to look at the green vegetables or the cobs or whatever else that is ready to harvest, and something happens, and then the whole crop is gone. So risk is one of the topmost concerns of the farmer from weather for many other reasons in terms of pests and other kinds of stuff that can impact. And the next risk is price. When I'm planting, I see that I can fetch 20 rupees for onions. By the time I harvest, it's 5 rupees. Quite often it is not even worth pulling out crop from my field. The volatility of prices is something which is another big concern and a risk that the farmer has. So this needs to be dealt with. And part of the reason why many of these farmers don't want their children to come back is the dignity of labor. That even assuming some of the farmers have higher incomes by virtue of the crops they are growing and some very good agroclimatic zones that they are in, only 1 in 10 years may be a bad year and they're well connected to the markets and so on. But the dignity of labor in agriculture is still not something that has been elevated, and therefore why do I want to do that kind of task is another concern which is there. Many years ago, just more as a next step of labor, nearly 20 years ago when we had set up e-Chowpal and farmers started bringing their produce, saying, why are you bringing produce as a part of conversation? People said, okay, lower costs and quality linked pricing, all of that was said. But something which was somewhat unexpected was that when we go to Mandi, our produce gets auctioned. So 100 days of effort, so 100 दिन का मेहनत का पूरा नीलामी हो रहा है. So in the mind you are saying I am auctioning my 100 days of effort, versus here I am able to determine saying that I know the price sitting at home, whether I want to sell now, later, sell to you, to sell to somebody else, I can decide. So it's more of a dignity in the selling decision. But in the whole process, what really goes through in the minds of farmers, it's an important revelation for us at that time. And you may do all that, but still when you walk around the villages, you see only very few houses in a village really have amenities that we take for granted in urban areas. So there is an aspiration that, yeah, I may live in village, I may still do agriculture, but can I have access to amenities, whether it is education, healthcare, housing, comfort of living, way of cooking, dealing with the climate, whatever kind of issues that are there, what we take for granted in urban are things which are still key aspirations for farmers. So that, in some sense, are what are top of mind concerns and aspirations and motivations for the farmers. Now, society at large, we are on 30th of August. On 1st of August, we completed consumption of all natural resources that the earth can produce by 31st of December. So that marks what is called the Earth Overshoot Day. So when we started measuring many years ago as a world, you regenerate resources, there's Earth's capacity to regenerate the natural resources. All that you can generate, if you consume by 31st of December and generate by 31st of December, you are a well-balanced kind of ecology, environment system. As years progressed, the date started advancing. So August 2nd was this year's Earth Overshoot Day. That from 2nd of August until 31st of December, notionally, we are in debt to our children and their children. We are consuming resources that rightfully belong to them. We are not regenerating enough. So a society at large has this as an issue. And obviously one of the expectations from the society at large, and which is typically either taken as a custodian by the governments or civil society organizations, wherever saying that we must deal with the environment and sustainability. So they talk about lower temperatures, or whether you talk about any other aspects of how do you deal with this consumption is a major challenge. And within India, if you look at the natural resources, we are even more starved compared to the world. We are 17% of world's population, but only 2.5% of land resource, only 4% of freshwater resource. And obviously we need to feed more people on these natural resources, and if we consume them much faster, obviously that's not a good solution for our future. So climate change, what I just mentioned, the Kerala and Tamil Nadu example is one illustration of that. You may say there is a normal monsoon when there's a forecast saying that if you are X percentage minus to X percentage plus of what is the normal is normal. But more critical from an agriculture perspective is the distribution, both in terms of space as well as time. So with climate change, what is also happening is there's so much of rain in sudden bursts and then extended periods of no rain, or a lot of rain in some place and no rain in a neighboring place. So I think all of these are the results that we are already now seeing. Things like very warm winters, things like unseasonal rains in summers. So all of these are things which are directly and immediately impacting, and what we saw as the farmers' concern of standing crops failing, they are a result of all this. So it is possible, and what the society is expecting is that agriculture contributes to climate resilience, maybe also to climate improvement. So a lot more carbon sequestration is possible through agriculture, far fewer release of greenhouse gases. So all of that are the expectations from agriculture as a sector. Now, obviously all of these are so many different data points that so much is from consumer perspective and farmer perspective and society at large. And obviously all people like us who are stakeholders too, saying that looking at these problems, looking at them as opportunities, use technology, use business models, do some services, whatever all that can be done. But I think if you're building something for tomorrow, how do you translate these multiple data points into certain insights? So I'm suggesting three insights that are likely to happen because of all this. One is that farms will be factories. And I'll talk about what actually it means. And second is homes will be farms as another prospect. And a lot of agriculture will go back to basics. So these are three important trends that I see happening. So farms as factories. So one has talked about precision farming, one has talked about climate resilient farming and all that. So first part is really in terms of agricultural technologies. You invent seeds, nutrition, that will take care of these kinds of issues. So in the past, if you're doing research and said, I have a great drought resilient seed. Now today, drought is forecast in a region, and a month later you realize that precipitation has occurred and too much of flooding has happened. So you use a drought resilient seed, now you have gone to the other extreme, and it will wait for some time before it germinates that resilience. So you need today seeds research which is really in terms of, doesn't matter if it is rain or sun, I should germinate. Okay, part of that is dealt with by saying we will cultivate a few things in a climate controlled agriculture. Some of the prosperity of the new world agriculture comes out of the greenhouse cultivation. So how do you mainstream where it is relevant? Obviously many crops which are open to sky are not as viable yet to run through greenhouses. So therefore it has to be different kinds of seed and nutrients and other growth promotion stuff and many other things which are possible in agriculture itself as technology. Second area, I guess, is where most of you will really be interested in. It is how do you bring in a lot more digital developments that are taking place into agriculture. Whether it is, again, going back to precision farming, to say, can I cut costs in terms of just giving only enough dosage that may be required, or just giving enough, whether it's water or nutrition or whatever else. And if you see a lot more propagation of something like micro irrigation and fertigation through that kind of micro irrigation, and all of that is a function of something like this, which are now getting digitized a lot more. And as the prices of sensors dropped, as the technology evolved to literally converge. When I said digital disruption, what is happening? My common analogy that I keep quoting is that you imagine a microscope where you can see things at a very micro level, and there's a telescope where you can see things at a distance. You use a remote control to control something which is at a distance. I will look at a processor that is churning data. Now, today's digital disruptions actually occurred because these four got combined. Whether you look at the mobile and the sensors which are embedded into literally anything, the intelligence that comes out of that by virtue of analytics that you do, and you do it all at a remote so that your gadgets that you're using are not heavily loaded. You can do processing elsewhere on cloud, and what you talk here, what you whisper somewhere else is all available to, there used to be what we call one big brother, there are multiple big brothers today. So it's all visible and audible to everybody. When you put all of this together and apply to farming, so much of action that is possible. And so I think much of the work is also here. Taranjeet must be here somewhere, and yesterday we were looking at the demonstration at one of our tobacco barns on a farmer's field. You cure tobacco after it is produced for conditioning at a certain level of temperature and all that. So now you heat it. Earlier, once in a while, the farmer used to open the door and, yeah, this looks this color, this kind of temperature, either increase the flow of fuel or reduce the flow of fuel. Today, you have a sensor inside, connected with all the data that is capturing continuously in terms of its humidity and temperature, and you pull it out onto cloud, and alerts get to the farmer in terms of now it's fallen below a band or above a band, and therefore you need to adjust that flow. And carrying on further, you can also adjust that through your remote and so on. So I think this was something which was to put a sensor inside a very hot environment and make use of that to control the quality of an output, when it can be applied literally to any other agriculture produce as it gets processed through. And so all of that is something which is what I call digital, and much of that obviously also uses for this communication. As somebody called it, if you call the first part of that as the hardware, and second part is software, and third is really liveware, in terms of where you are, what you're doing, all of that goes back into farming. So all of these, I think, are a lot of action, and as you hear some of the other panels, you'll see in terms of what work is already progressed on that front and what more can happen. So literally you're turning farms into factories. All that I mean there is that what you input had very little control on what you're outputting in the past. So much was dependent on so many factors which is outside your control. With all this precision, you are able to control that relatively more. Obviously, with so much dependent on weather, you still look towards the sky and pray to the God, saying that, no, let the crop be good. But notwithstanding that issue, I think so many things are coming into control now by virtue of these technologies. Homes as farms, kitchen gardens. Okay, now when I say homes as farms, it is unlikely that 100% of homes will become 100% of the consumption producing what they consume. But there's a trend which has got kicked off, and multiple models are going to happen here. So if you have a kitchen garden, whether it's in your small balcony or whether you have a larger area behind your house, depending on what you have, obviously you have no concern as a consumer that what are the chemical residues in this, because you've seen how it is grown yourself. From a sustainability perspective, it is 0 miles because it is not moved anywhere. It's just straight from backyard to your house. Most of the vegetables are likely to be coming through this. So literally 100% of my own vegetables in our family now don't get bought. And we have surplus actually that we distribute among friends, partly out of just the open yard. And so I have a greenhouse which also experiments with many of these new technologies at a personal level. So that really feeds in at this point of time. But interesting business opportunity here is that much of this will get converted into a do-it-yourself business opportunity. That you deliver much like FMCG business, home kits for farming. That today it's complicated for somebody to learn and do many of these kinds of things. So if you can use appliances in your drawing room and your bedroom and your kitchen, there's no reason you cannot use much of that simplified when it comes as an FMCG kit. Do it yourself. A lot more of this will happen in your own backyard. Now, the second thing is that, okay, this may still be difficult for many people. Time is also an issue. Space is also an issue. But the other business model which can also happen here is space for a whole community of terrace for a flats or common community area for a gated community and so on, that you outsource this whole activity as literally build, own and operate by a technical expert who is producing, and then the first call of that is on the community's houses. And I see much of this happening in many of the metros already, and this is a trend which will trigger. So if not the first, maybe some of the second will happen as an important element. Between the two, the assessment is that 10% of all vegetable consumption in the country will move to this kind of a mode, and the interesting business models possible in terms of how do you link consumers and the service providers and so on. And the third is you outsource not just in your own backyard or terrace, but outsource a few kilometers away. That, let's say, a community of 5,000 consumers get connected to a 500 farmers, and somebody is playing the role of the intermediation in terms of many models again are possible here, subscriptions and order and buy and many of these kinds of things, which is far more productive, and many more items can come now beyond what can happen inside. So all of this will essentially mean is that you are not selling what is produced, but you are producing what is already bought or what is ordered. I think that shift is one of the most significant shifts that is going to occur, not only with respect to these three models that I talked about, but even in the first set of the farms as factories, that in terms of produce the buy rather than sell the produce. I think that shift is what is going to be the key. Now, the last portion is really back to basics as to what might happen. You know, much of the ills of the modern agriculture are now considered the monocropping. At one level, we say that no, India is behind because of fragmented farms. If we were US, if we were Australia, we could have done like this. But the world has come a full circle, or coming to a full circle nearly, saying that no, all of this is actually bad. That this is the problem for many of the resistant insects and pests, and this is the reason for many more chemicals getting used. This is the reason for soil not getting nourished and naturally, and so on and so forth. And therefore, in line with those natural resource and climate change kind of concerns of society, the shifts are going to happen into from this monocropping to what is called polycropping, or what is called a permaculture with trees, plants, and what is now called an integrated farming, which is getting increasingly popular, with, in some cases, the silviculture, pisciculture, animal husbandry, beekeeping. So when you do all of this together, it becomes somewhat a self-sufficient ecosystem. The costs go down, your risks go down, and therefore this requires, the reason why it is not taken off is that literally every individual farmer needs to be a research scientist to build it, because there's no one grand solution for everybody, and that's the reason the monocropping and that kind of agriculture has really expanded. And this capacity to observe, if I do something at 4 in the morning, is that very different compared to when I do at 7 in the morning. And we discovered inside our own greenhouse, I mean, obviously greenhouse is less amenable to pollination. So whichever are crops which you need to pollinate, at what time of the morning or day you do, has significant bearing on your productivity. Now this is enormous opportunity for technology to support the farmers in terms of how do you engage in situ research and building as an integrated kind of an opportunity. Some of these are much more climate friendly and natural resource friendly, and therefore if the August 2nd will keep moving and getting advanced, there is no escape but to get here as a possibility. And one of the things now we are also observing is farms as a source of renewable energy. Already a few farms, what they produce out of solar energy is more than what they produce out of their own crops. Because you not only use it for your own irrigation, but you also put it off onto the grid, and wherever the states have supported that policy. And in next 3 to 5 years' time, when the solar costs are going to become even more attractive, even without necessarily the subsidy that is available for renewable research, renewable energy, I think some of this is also going to be very important. So in an integrated farming, we talked about animal husbandry, beekeeping, and all those kind of other kinds of cultures, but the solar culture is also going to be an integral part of that integrative farming, and that's an opportunity. So that's where I leave you with whatever is churned out, those 3 takeaways as I see, and how many of the technologies can flow in and do that. I would see that no better opportunity than Indian agriculture to do good and be good at the same time. One, he talked about huge numbers, and those numbers will become too small when this is actually seen and driven as an opportunity. And I think therefore the numbers can only expand, is what I would like to leave the thought with you. Thank you.